There comes a moment in every soul's life when the silence grows so heavy it starts to speak louder than any voice in the room. You felt that silence. It didn't just echo, it pressed into your chest, into your ribs, into your very breath. You wondered if anyone saw it. If anyone could hear the weight of your prayers when no words would come. But what if I told you that silence was sacred, that the stillness you mistook for abandonment was actually divine attention? You weren't being ignored. You were being observed. You were in the middle of a test that wasn't made for the many. This wasn't just hardship. It wasn't just bad luck. It wasn't just another season. It was a custom-designed examination of your character, a soul-level audit to see what would remain standing when everything comfortable, predictable, and supportive was stripped away. You didn't just survive. You didn't just get by. You passed. Not because you were perfect, but because you stayed honest. Not because you had all the answers, but because you didn't fake strength. You felt the tremble, you felt the ache, and yet, you didn't run from it. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you chosen. You clicked on this message because something ancient inside you knew it was time to stop pretending your story was ordinary. You're not here because of chance. You're here because there's a frequency in you that heaven can recognize. You didn't manufacture it. You forged it in fire. You built it in silence. And now, that resonance is changing the room around you without you saying a word. While others performed for approval, you held your breath in the furnace and whispered to the dark, "I'll wait for the light." While others carved shortcuts through the hard places, you kept walking straight through the storm, one unseen step at a time. You've wept in bathrooms no one will ever know about. You've made peace with the fact that your reward may never look like applause. And still, you keep showing up. That's not normal. That's not weakness. That's alignment. Your suffering was not wasted. Your endurance wasn't ignored. You were sitting for the kind of test that has no paper, no ink, and no audience. The kind of test that only God administers. Not because He wanted you to fail, but because He needed someone to prove that it's still possible to go through the valley and come out with your soul intact. The hardest exam isn't the one with the trick questions. It's the one that tests your posture when no one is watching. It's the one that feels more like a funeral than a graduation. And the only diploma is the person you've become. This isn't about religion. This isn't about proving yourself to anyone. This is about remembering what the fire revealed about your foundation. And make no mistake, there was a fire. It came as betrayal, as delay, as heartbreak that took the shape of silence. It came as unanswered prayers, unopened doors, and moments that made you question whether your tears were worth anything at all. But look at you now. Still here. Still breathing. Still holding on to something deeper than logic. That isn't coincidence. That's spiritual fortitude. That's faith without the filters. That's what separates those who are simply surviving from those who are silently stewarding something sacred. Let's speak plainly for a moment. Because what you've endured didn't just hurt, it refined. What you walked through wasn't punishment, it was placement. You weren't overlooked, you were being prepared. Most people don't survive that kind of process without becoming bitter. But somehow, your heart stayed soft. Somehow, you chose integrity over imitation. And in a world that celebrates performance, you chose presence. You didn't fake it. You didn't force it. You didn't sell your soul for a sense of security. That's not just admirable. That's revolutionary. You were chosen not because you looked qualified, but because you were willing to remain faithful when nothing around you affirmed your calling. This is not a motivational speech. This is a mirror, a reminder, a declaration. You're not weak for having cried. You're not failing for having doubted. You're not broken for having questioned your worth during the silence. In fact, the fact that you did feel it, the fact that you didn't numb yourself, the fact that you kept your conscience clear when no one was watching, that's the evidence of your strength. That's the signature of someone who has passed the hardest kind of test. Do you know how rare that is? Do you understand how few people make it through what you've made it through without compromising? Without growing cold? Without losing themselves completely? You are a living testament that pain doesn't have to poison. That loss doesn't have to steal. That silence doesn't have to suffocate. You are the proof that it's still possible to bend and not break, to burn and not be consumed. That's not metaphor. That's not poetry. That's spiritual architecture. That's a life built on something deeper than applause. That's endurance with a pulse. And now, something is shifting. There's a sacred shift in the atmosphere around you because what you carry isn't fabricated. It's forged. There's an authority in your stillness now. The kind that doesn't raise its voice but still causes the room to lean in. The kind that doesn't demand attention but draws it without trying. Because your frequency is different. It's calibrated by fire. It's aligned with a higher rhythm. The storms didn't break you, they tuned you. And now, every step you take echoes with clarity. Not because you have it all figured out, but because you finally made peace with the parts you can't explain. And that is where true power begins. Now breathe. Not just to survive, but to stretch. Not just to keep going, but to expand. Your breath is no longer carrying panic. It's carrying purpose. Every inhale is backed by endurance. Every exhale is infused with intention. You're no longer reacting, you're responding. You're no longer proving, you're becoming. That's the sign of someone who's passed the exam not with perfection, but with purity. Not with applause, but with alignment. And as we journey deeper into this message, I want you to remember one truth. The evidence of your elevation isn't in how loud you are, it's in how still you've become. The greatest transformations don't make noise. They make impact. And you are now carrying the kind of presence that changes rooms, not with charisma, but with calibration. You're not trying to be seen anymore. You're too busy seeing clearly. You're not chasing validation anymore. You've become your own confirmation. That's not pride. That's peace. And it's sacred. It's earned. It's holy. They judged you as slow when in fact you were steady. They thought you were disorganized, when in truth you were simply building something they couldn't yet comprehend. You weren't born to impress crowds but to align deeply with your Creator. That misunderstanding was part of the exam too, for God needed to see if you could walk by faith when you were seen as foolish, walk with integrity when you were called fake, hold your tongue when falsely accused, and speak life when surrounded by death. Many failed because they needed to be seen. They couldn't survive invisibility. They couldn't handle being overlooked, passed up, denied. But you did. You didn't just survive it, you transformed in it. When you prayed behind closed doors, cried behind silent walls, worshipped without recognition, and gave without thanks, God watched it all. He wasn't looking at your performance, He was watching your posture. When no one clapped, He was listening to your heart. When no one answered, and that posture of yours, that humility, that faithfulness, that resilience, became the incense that rose to heaven. So while others were chasing platforms, you were chasing purity. While they were counting followers, you were counting the cost. And while they were performing, you were enduring. You didn't cheat by cutting corners or selling out your soul. You didn't pretend to be something you weren't just to win approval. You stayed rooted even when the winds tried to rip you apart. And that's exactly why you passed, not because you were the loudest, but because you were the most loyal, not because you had all the answers, but because you held on to the truth even when it didn't make sense. You passed the test of waiting. You passed the test of silence. You passed the test of rejection. And maybe the hardest of all, you passed the test of still believing, even after the promise looked like a lie. It's that unwavering belief that made you chosen, not because you never doubted, but because your faith outlasted your fear. And now, as you're stepping out of the wilderness, as the dust clears, as the shadows recede, there is a knowing rising in your spirit, a quiet roar that says, I didn't die there. I didn't give up there. I didn't bow to what tried to break me. And now, I am ready, not because I took a shortcut, but because I walked through the fire and don't smell like smoke anymore. You're not who you used to be. Your scars have stories. Your silence holds wisdom. Your heart beats with heaven's rhythm. And now the world is about to meet the version of you that was forged in God's fire, refined in secret, shaped by obedience. This is not just a comeback, this is your calling, finally clothed in clarity. And no one will be able to deny what heaven has already affirmed, because when God chooses a soul, He doesn't consult the crowd. When He promotes you, it's not because of public votes, it's because of private victories. And that is your story. You won the invisible war. You endured the secret storms. You passed the private test. And now God is about to make the result public. Prepare for the table He's setting for you, the one in front of your enemies. Not to mock them, but to show them what favor really looks like. Not for revenge, but for redemption. Because even those who wounded you will have to watch your rising, not out of spite, but out of divine orchestration. They will see that your story wasn't built on bitterness, but on brokenness healed by grace. They will see that your glow is not from lights, but from the light of God that never went out, even in your darkest hour. Because even when your hope was flickering, your soul kept whispering, I still believe. And God heard that whisper. He honored that whisper. And now, the time has come, and the time where delay turns into display, obscurity becomes testimony, suffering gives way to glory, and pain births purpose. Not for your ego, but for His kingdom. Not for applause, but for impact. Because what you carry now is holy. It's not talent, it's anointing. It's not ambition, it's assignment. And the world doesn't need another performer, it needs a presence, someone who has been with God, who has walked with Him in the dark, who has chosen Him again and again, even when no one else did. And that someone is you, chosen not because of perfection, but because of persistence. Called not because you were clean, but because you were willing. And favored not because of fame, but because of faith. Now, you carry something deeper, a wisdom the world didn't teach, a strength that suffering birthed, a discernment that deception couldn't fool. And that makes you dangerous to the darkness, because you're not easily seduced by praise or shaken by pressure. You've been through too much to be shallow. You've seen too much to be superficial. Your eyes have cried rivers. Your knees have known gravel. Your heart has known God. And now you're emerging from this season, not empty, but equipped. Not weary, but weaponized. And the enemy who tried to bury you is about to realize he only planted you. And God is about to water the harvest of your tears. Every moment of heartbreak, every night of confusion, every lonely hour was a seed, and now that seed has broken open and life is rising from the soil of your suffering. Purpose is growing from the ashes of your past. And promise is shouting louder than pain. So walk forward now, not with arrogance, but with authority. The kind of authority that only comes from the anointing of being tested and trusted by God. The kind of peace that can't be explained. The kind of strength that scares hell. The kind of joy that survived sorrow. This is your season, the one heaven whispered about while you were still crying in the corner. The one the prophets dreamed about when they saw a remnant rising. The one your ancestors prayed for when they said, "Lord, bless my bloodline with warriors who won't bow to Babylon." And that's who you are, the answer to a prayer from generations past, the fulfillment of promises whispered in heaven's halls, the living proof that God still chooses the broken, still uses the crushed, and still lifts the faithful. Your story isn't over, it's just starting. The hardest chapter is behind you, and the glory chapter has begun. You didn't skip the pain, but now you won't miss the promise. And the same hand that held you in the valley is now raising you on the mountain. So don't look back unless it's to testify. Don't slow down unless it's to kneel and thank Him. Don't second guess the door He's opening for you. Walk through it boldly, because you didn't cheat to get here, you bled for this. You prayed for this. You fasted for this. And heaven is smiling, not because you were the fastest, but because you were faithful. And in the kingdom of God, that's what passes the test. You didn't just survive. You transformed. While others were pleading for shortcuts and handouts, you got stronger. While others drowned in bitterness, you breathed in grace. While others cursed the silence, you learned to hear God's whisper within it. You have walked through deserts that no one else even knew existed in your heart. You have bled in battles where your only armor was faith. And now, after all this time, you finally realize the truth: you were never being punished. You were being prepared. You were not being abandoned. You were being equipped. You were not unloved. You were handpicked. You are not here by chance. You are chosen. The pain was the prerequisite. The silence was the syllabus. The betrayal was the lesson plan. The loneliness was your field test. And you passed. Not by cheating. Not by compromising. Not by selling out. But by holding on when you had every reason to let go. By loving when hate would have been easier. By believing when doubt was more seductive. And now heaven leans in, with all of creation watching, because the exam is over and the glory is coming. You thought you were just being tested. But the truth is, you were being promoted. Every tear sown in private is about to bloom in public honor. Every no you endured is about to be redeemed with a yes so divine it rewrites your history. The rejection you thought was the end was actually your redirection to your destiny. The silence you misread as absence was God sitting beside you, grating your heart under pressure. You passed. Not because you were the smartest, the strongest, or the most righteous, but because you stayed. You didn't run. You didn't retaliate. You didn't lose your soul in the fire. You let it refine you. And now the stage is being set. The light is being drawn to your life. And God is about to show the world why He chose you. But let's be clear, this is not about revenge. This is not about proving the doubters wrong or flexing on your haters. This is about becoming who you were always meant to be. The healed version. The whole version. The anointed version. The version that inspires, uplifts, and transforms others, not because you're flawless, but because you're faithful. The version that doesn't need applause to keep going. The version that can sit with the broken and not be afraid of their mess. The version that carries the fragrance of heaven because you've been crushed like oil. And that's the point. The crushing was necessary. The weight was intentional. The silence was sacred. Because without them, you wouldn't have found your calling. You wouldn't have heard the voice that speaks louder than chaos. You wouldn't have discovered the power that lives within you. And you wouldn't have become someone who could carry the mantle without dropping it. So here you are, at the edge of something holy. After years of questions, wounds, and delays, you are standing on sacred ground. Don't rush it. Don't despise the process. Don't apologize for your strength. Just breathe. Receive. And remember, you were chosen. And the hardest test? You passed. Without shortcuts. Without cheating. With honor. That's why heaven is about to open over your life. Because now, you're ready. Final message: let this story anchor deep into your soul. What you've been through was not meant to break you, it was allowed to build you. The pain wasn't pointless. The fire wasn't failure. It was refinement. And now you rise, not in arrogance, not in bitterness, but in purpose. You were chosen for this. And now it's your time to walk in it. Quietly. Boldly. Gracefully. Powerfully. You are not who the world said you were. You are who God knew you would become.